Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Our next guest, Alero Ayida Otobo, is the CEO of School of Politics, Policy and Governance, an unconventional school of the research-anchored fixed policy initiative designed to transform politics in Nigeria and the rest of Africa by building a massive base and pipeline of a new value-based and disruptive thinking political class with the right knowledge and skills to solve complex problems of development. Well, welcome to the morning show, Alero. Good to have you, and good morning.
Good morning.
All right, so we're seeing our young population pick interest in politics now. Some Nigerians would say that they have lost hope with the young politicians in this administration. Well, given your experience, what would be your advice to young people going into politics, and how can they set themselves apart from the older generation?
Thank you very much. Let me start by saying thank you for having me on your show again. 24 hours later, I really appreciate this. And that's a great, great question, Ochi. What will I tell young people that aspire to be politicians? There are three things I will tell them to work on. Three things that, from experience, we have found are critical. And those three things is their competence, their knowledge, their skills. We have found that there's a deficit of technical knowledge, economic knowledge, political knowledge among politicians, not just in Nigeria, but across Africa. It's as if anyone can get up and say, I want to be a politician. I want to run for office. But the question is, have they been prepared to step into that role? I like saying that if someone wants to be a doctor, he goes to medical school and becomes a doctor after 5-6 years. A lawyer, you go to law school, you do a degree. But what is the process for developing and preparing our politicians to ensure that when they get into office, they will serve the people and they will solve the development problems that plague the countries in Africa? So 3 key things. I'll actually make it 4. First, we have to work on our character to understand that who we are when no one is watching has to align with who we are in public. Secondly, competence. Third, capacity. And the 4th is your ability to work with others, collaboration. And then I've heard a 5th C, and that is compassion. Do you have compassion for the people that you're called to serve? So to the young politicians, you want to step into office, make sure you prepare yourself. And that preparation is a journey. And it's a journey that you've got to be ready to commit to and to pay the price, so that when you get into office, you do the right thing in the right way, and you serve your people. And you serve them with a heart of compassion, with understanding, and with knowledge. That's how I will tell, the advice I will give. And that advice would be to say, get into a school, prepare yourself by educating yourself. And of course, you know that I'm going to mention the School of Politics, Policy and Governance. That would be a great place to start.
Now, Alero, you talk about quite a number of skill sets required by whoever is interested in getting into politics. You talk about character, competence, capacity, collaboration, and also compassion. And those are key for any personality that is interested in politics. But what about Nigeria as a whole? How can we make Nigeria's democracy work?
How can you make
Nigeria's democracy work?
Oh, wow. How can we make it work? I think there are 3 things, 3 critical, what I would call, that I mentioned yesterday, triangular pillar of democracy. 3 pillars. And for our democracy to work, every one of those pillars has to be functional. And the first is you and I, the citizens, Nigerians, the Nigerian on the street, the Nigerian in the rural area, in the village, the Nigerian in Lagos, in Kano, in Borno. The Nigerian on the street, what does the Nigerian need? Education, health, quality education, not just to be in school, because you can be in school and be learning nothing, but quality education in a school that is functional. Then a health facility that when I go in, I will get proper medical attention. And then I want to go on roads that will not damage my car, So infrastructure, I want power. So as a citizen, I want to be looked after and to be cared for. So that's the first pillar for ensuring that democracy works. Do we care for the citizen? Are my needs being taken care of? I mean, just in the last, and I'll give you a typical example. I got back home yesterday and found out that we had not had power since 5 p.m. the day before. 20 hours with no power. We went online to check if there was any problem, no information. Power didn't come back till 8 p.m. And I live in the city of Lagos. And I don't live on the other side of the track. I live in a comfortable part of Lagos. Over 24 hours, no light, no explanation. So the first is, as a citizen, I want my needs to be taken care of. I want my children to be well educated. That's the first pillar. It has to work. The second is, what is the pillar? It's leadership. I don't know how many of you have read, if you remember the book written 30 years ago at least, by one of my favorite authors and the first winner of a Nobel Prize for Literature is Chinua Achebe. He wrote his book, The Problem with Nigeria. And what's the problem? One sentence in a small book. The problem with Nigeria is leadership. So it's leadership, leadership, leadership. And we have to address the quality of our leadership. There's a joke that we have in the School of Politics, Policy and Governance, is that we spend more time actually interviewing the person who's going to look after our store. If I'm someone who's an entrepreneur and I have a shop, I will spend more time interviewing that person, or the banks will spend more time interviewing who they're going to take on as a staff, member of staff, than we actually spend interviewing our politicians and seeing whether they qualify to govern us and to rule us. The third pillar is the constitutional framework. Do we have a constitution that works? Is it a constitution for the people, by the people? And because of all the conversations that have been taking place in the last 2-3 weeks, we know that the Senate is trying to bring the Constitution to the fore, and we are declaring that we don't just need it to be amended. There are many, and it's a growing number, a strong voice that is saying we need a new Constitution. We don't need one to be fixed. We need a new one. We need a new car that can move our nation to where we need to get to. So that in a nutshell, I will say, to make our democracy work, let's pay attention to these 3 triangular pillars and fix each one in a deliberate way and in an intentional way. And let us be true to ourselves to make sure that we do fix these 3 things.
Yes, Chinua Achebe did write in his book that the problem of Nigeria is leadership. Now, what, in your opinion, is a way forward to correct the culture of leadership that inherently subverts the public good? We see our politicians today elevating their personal, interests above the collective well-being of citizens.
Could you just repeat the last bit again?
I was talking about the culture of leadership.
Yes.
What is it, in your opinion? How can we correct the culture of leadership?
Okay, I'll say, let me, to start by saying, what's the question I will say is, what are we correcting? If we can all agree on what we need to correct, then we can take the corrective measures. So I'm going to put it across to you, to both of you, Adetogunbo and Oluchi, that what we need to correct are 3 things. And if we correct them, our leadership quotient will increase significantly. The first is our culture of impunity. We've got to address it. Our leaders do anything, whenever, and we're all guilty. So I'm not pointing fingers at the top. Even our followers, you and I, do things with impunity. We drive on the streets one way in the wrong direction. We break street lights. When the light is red, we break that. So there's this culture of impunity that is ingrained in our DNA that we need to, like how you put water through a hose and you flush it out, we need to flush out that impunity. Then we have the culture of lawlessness. And that is prevalent, unfortunately. And the third is our culture of complacency. And what is complacency? I call it, and I've heard it being called learned helplessness. We throw our hands up and act like we can't do anything, but we have so much power in our hands as citizens. If we occupy the office of the citizen properly, we will address this culture of complacency and just thinking that we can't do we can't help ourselves, and we can't help, we have to take whatever comes to us. So if we can address these three cultures, we're going to see a shift in our leadership quotient. And we can. I'm confident that we can. And you know why? Because the shift has started. People are beginning to say enough is enough. People are beginning to say we want a better Nigeria. You and I want a better Nigeria. Even how Arise TV shares the news and disseminates information shows that there is a cry for a better Nigeria and a better governed Nigeria. So it's happening, and people are taking the steps and addressing the issues, and I'm excited about it. I'm not despondent. When through June 12th, the build up to June 12th, every time people come out to protest, I'm excited. Every time people speak up, I'm excited. You know why? Because we're breaking that complacency. We're breaking the culture of learned helplessness. And the way forward is that journey of the way forward. We've embarked on it and we've started. And so I'm very confident that the Nigeria that we all want to see, it's emerging, and everyone playing their role will make it happen. I'm so confident about that.
Very well said, Alero. We'll have to go on a short break now, and when we come back, we'll continue on the conversation. So do stay with us.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome back. You're watching The Morning Show right here on the Arise News channel. And just before the break, we're discussing with one of our guests, Alero Ayida Otobo, who is the co-chair, Fix Politics, and CEO of Unconventional Schools of Politics, Policy and Governance. Now, before the break, you talked about the culture of impunity, lawlessness and complacency. And earlier on, you talked about triangular pillars of making democracy work. So one of the things that I'd like to ask you is what's your take on restructuring as a democratic tool to good governance? Because a lot of people are agitating for that. So it would be interesting to sort of gauge your thoughts on restructuring.
It's a big issue, and I'm not even convinced that we fully understand the depth and the need for restructuring. If you look back, let's just sort of go back in history. We had, and many of us are familiar, those of us that are old enough, and I'm old enough to remember vaguely, there were not pyramids in the north. They were real. They weren't just pictures. Also, many of us remember the cocoa and how important cocoa was for the Southwest. And then oil came into the picture and the narrative changed. All of a sudden, all eyes, attention was paid to oil. The consequence of that is that the economic strength of each of the regions was slowly depleted, and they were weakened over time. We have to go back and begin to recreate the structure that gives us what we call true federalism. And true federalism means that everyone around the table has the same voice, their views are respected, and they have the ability to take the decisions that they need to take for their people. What has happened over time is that we've begun to lose that. And unfortunately, I'm not sure whether we are ready for restructuring. I'm not sure whether the people, you and I, are ready to pay the price to see restructuring. And I'm just a bit concerned that we have not fully developed the understanding of what it means to be a true federal nation, a nation that respects and honors each of the regions, sees the gift that each of the regions bring to the table, and they are willing to change the laws, the constitution, the entire political system to recognize restructuring. Why will the restructuring happen if the people who are governing us will lose control and will lose their strength? And so my question is, are we ready? Are we ready to create the governing structure that will enable us to be a true federalism? I'm not sure we are. I'm not sure we have the strength of character to do it. I may sound pessimistic, but it's what in watching and seeing and understanding and what I've heard over the last few years, it's going to take a lot more than talking. It's going to take action, and it's going to take the National Assembly standing and doing what is right for the nation.
Right, you said we don't have the strength in our character to move the nation forward in that way. Well, I'll ask you. Yesterday, Nigeria celebrated her Democracy Day. Now, how will you say the democratic rule has fared so far since 1999?
Should I ask you that question? How do you think?
That's your question. Not mine.
I know. I'm like thinking that's the reason why we're doing all that we're doing.
Yeah.
Because it hasn't delivered on its promises. It has not delivered on what we expected. I mean, if you look at our Human Development Index, the number of children out of school has increased. Don't ignore the numbers you're hearing. When we started this journey 8-10 years ago, we were 10 million children out of school. There are now figures of 13-15 million out of school. Our Human Capital Index is one of the lowest in the world. Transparency Index, we're doing poorly. So on every single measurement, when you compare us to the nations that started the journey with us in 1960, whether it's Singapore, whether it's Malaysia, whether it's Indonesia, we have not done well. I'll give an example. In 1960, Singapore and Nigeria had the same GDP approximately, okay? Per capita income, around, I think $300, around $300. Fast forward 30 years while Lee Kuan Yew was there, it had gone up to $12,000 US. We were struggling at about 1,500. Do you know what it is now in 2021? Singapore is at 62,000, between 60 and 63,000 US per citizen. And we are struggling at between 2,000 to 2,200. So the answer to your question, when you compare nations that started with us in 1960 and where they are and where we are 60 years later, has democracy served us well? Between democracy and between the military rule, we failed our nation. The statistics, the measurements, the poverty on the streets. I don't even know how people survive. I don't know how they feed their children. I really do not. So that's the answer to your question. We have not done well. And it's time for us to change that narrative. And it's time for us to really buckle up and do what is right and to play our role and play our part before we leave the stage. And I'm hoping that from 2023, even the next 2 years, we can still make change happen. And by 2023, we will see that shift that we need to see so that we can look at the brutal facts on the ground and take measures. You know, one of the things that I'm going to stop here very quickly about brutal facts, because as I mentioned that I think I need to say, as Nigerians, you know, we have to really be true to ourselves and admit that things are not working and that, like those statistics I just gave you, that we have failed. Because what that does is then we now take solutions, we take steps, we implement solutions that truly address the core issues that we need to address. Take, for example, education. We continuously have solutions that look at improving the quality of our teachers. We have workshops, 3-day workshops, 5-day workshops, 2 weeks workshops. The truth is those short workshops don't really impact and increase the quality of our teachers. Where we need to be going is to reform our teacher education, reform the institutions like colleges of education and Department of Education in our universities. We're not reforming them. If you go and teach, if you go to an early childhood class in a college of education, they are teaching in a way that they were being taught 20 years ago. The narrative has changed. The way early childhood teachers are taught is totally different. You don't sit in a classroom. You engage, you're on the floor. You are learning differently. You're using imaginal education strategies. That is how you begin to address those problems. We haven't done well with democracy. We haven't received the benefits, and the data confirm that.
Right.
The data confirms that.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I really like the way you compare the democracy here in Nigeria to some of those Asian countries that you mentioned. You talked about Singapore, Malaysia. But what I would really like for you to do is actually compare the level of democracy here in Nigeria to the African nations. So how do we measure, and how does that make you feel?
I did think about how does that make me feel. I've been to Rwanda twice, perhaps even 3 times. I have to think about it. And I went, I think, last year or the year before lockdown, 2019. And I was just as depressed as the first time I went. Why was I depressed? Depressed but pleased, because I saw a nation that had taken definitive steps to solve its problems. I saw a leader that had a love for its people and determined to help its people. We know when Kagame came into power, one of the first things he did, and for me that was just a signal, and I don't know how many of you know this, but after the war, he noticed that a lot of his citizens, his people, they were walking around without shoes. Do you know what the president did? He bought at least a pair of shoes for every single citizen, young, old, every single adult, every single child got a pair of shoes. That is a leader who cares for his citizens. Also, when you're flying into Rwanda, one of the things you notice is that when you buy, you know how you buy on the plane, you buy duty-free, as many of you know. Most airlines give you plastic bags for your shopping. All the airlines flying into Kigali have to use paper bags. Why? Because of their love for the environment. So plastics are banned. Plastic bags are banned. That is a thinking government. That's a thinking president. I'm giving you examples. And you go to, again, you look at all the parameters for not just Rwanda, Botswana. Botswana, look at the education indicators. You know, they have close to 98% literacy rate. That is practically every single person can read and write in Botswana once they are of the age to go to school. Nigeria, we're still struggling at around 60%, lower in some states, and 80% in some southwest states. Where am I going to? Compare the health indicators in Botswana, in Mauritius, with Nigeria. So you can see maternal mortality, we have one of the highest, either the highest or the second highest in the world now. So on every single parameter, every single indicator tells us that Nigeria, and when you look at the failed state index, I don't have the figures right now, but Google and check the failed state index, we are doing pretty poorly there. So to compare to Rwanda, to compare to Botswana. Just walk, step into those nations, and you know there's a difference. The last time, and I'll close with this, when I went for a walk. I love to walk. I actually love walking. So every nation I visit, I have to go on. My feet have to touch their streets. And this morning I went for a walk, and one thing I noticed, you know what I noticed? Adetokunbo. Every single gutter was clean, sparkling clean, not one waste, not one plastic bottle, no paper in any of the gutters. You know what that means? There's somebody who's carrying out their function every day, cleaning the streets and cleaning out the gutters. You walk down Adeola Odeku, Victoria Island, and tell me what you see in the gutters. In fact, you wouldn't even know there's a gutter there. You know why? Because it's filled with plastic bottles, filth, and dirt. And I can't get over it. I don't understand why we can't deal with waste. Anybody who's an entrepreneur, go into waste management.
Well, thank you very much, Alero. It was quite a pleasure to have you. A very informative session today.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.